So our first speaker that we have today is Jeanne Allen from US EPA. Jeanne is education lead for the Gulf of Mexico program, Gulf of Mexico Commission? Division. Sorry, there's so many acronyms. And she's going to be talking about the history of HABs and HABSOS tool here in the Gulf of Mexico. So Jeanne, whenever you're ready, I think your stuff is up here.
Okay. Good afternoon. So Gulf of Mexico program underwent a realignment with EPA, and that's why we're called Gulf of Mexico Division. So just in case anybody's wondering what happened, I didn't leave. We just renamed ourselves. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of HAB on the HABSOS tool that was developed through NCDDC years ago, back in 2000 when I was back at NCDDC. I started working with HABs and creating the HABSOS tool. So what I'm going to walk you through is a little bit of the history from 2000 to 2011, and then we're going to fast forward to about 2 months ago, something that happened. And then I know someone else here is going to follow up from some of the things that I'm going to finish out with the tool. So again, the history, it did become a binational collaboration, and we're going to go into that, and I'm going to do it pretty quickly because it probably doesn't matter to most of y'all about the binational part of it as much anymore. But why that collaboration? It is one Gulf. HABs know no boundaries, right? We know that it's going to travel between Texas to Mexico, Mexico into Texas. We know that even in Cuba that they would see some of that. So it was very important that we did have that collaboration. When we started with the collaboration, just getting the 5 Gulf states was quite a collaboration, because what we found out really quick, 5 states, 5 different ways of collecting data, 5 ways of trying to share the data, and it did not work very well, and we had a lot of issues with that. And we're going to talk about that. Of course, we all know what the human impacts of this. Again, this is an old slide. We're talking history. I went history, okay, old slide. So we all know about this. So it started in 2002 with one of the first meetings in Mexico, where it started with the binational, and that's where our director, well, then the director of EPA, Brian Griffith, was involved. It was before I was there. And so in May 2003, we had the first HABSOS case study that happened at Stennis Space Center. And we started, this is where we brought in the 5 folks from 5 different states. And we started talking about, what kind of data do you collect? Can you share your data? And they're like, oh no. Mississippi's like, no way. Florida's like, yes, absolutely, we'll share that data. Alabama's like, I don't know, we need to check on that. Louisiana's like, not so sure yet. Texas was like, yeah, I think we probably can. But when we looked at the data sets, Florida had a wonderful set of data collection. And Mississippi just had this little bit. And I'm like, well, how do you want me to put this together and create a tool that's going to be useful when I don't have enough data? So we talked about it with all the states, and we had data collected in different formats. So we had to do some conversions, and we had to, it was a lot of fun. It was a little stressful, but the meetings were very productive. And what you see on the right-hand side is the dinosaur age of HABSOS tool 101. It was the first one, 1.0. It was created using the ArcIMS tool. It was available at the time. It was we put the data sets in there. What did we put in there? The basics, because that's all we had. We took the Florida data and we put it in and said, okay, folks, this is what Florida has. And then we started putting the other data sets as we got the data. Here's how we got around being able to put the HAB data in. We couldn't show the actual numbers. The values were not going to be released to the public. So we had to create a generic sliding scale of where that data. So we had our low, medium, highs, and you'll see the different colors that are in there, the red, green, yellows, and oranges. Because we were able to do that, the states were willing to share the data with us through the tool. We had very, very little data at that point, but that was our starting point. You have to start somewhere to go to the next step. We continued with our binational meetings. Mexico was very interested in getting on board because they were having death related to red tide, and they were wanting to make change. It got into an aquarium. It killed some of their fish. It was into the public drinking systems in Mexico. So the pilot project started when there were 3 particular years that we were looking at the data, 96, 97, and 2000. And you can see the extent for each of those years. And this is why it was so important. We knew it was going to happen. We know it happens in Florida every year. You know, the Northern Gulf, we don't see the HAB events as much, although now that Mississippi's on the third one since 1997, it's quite interesting right now. And then Texas, we know they have theirs as well. But we wanted to know, could it be forecasted? What do we need to know? What are we missing? And so that's when we brought everybody in the room and said, okay, what do we need? And everybody just started throwing out the different things that we needed. And that's where it started, the brainstorming session of everybody in a room talking about, well, we need to know something about salinity. We need to know about some chlorophyll. We need some imagery. Can we get imagery? And so that's how it started. So there is HABSOS in its 1.1 version, probably. It's not moved very much. And what you're seeing, the slides that are sliding in and out, are just some of the different data sets that we started to put in. NOAA was very helpful in helping us get some near real-time data to put in there. We had NOAA data that we were getting from the buoys, and we were trying to bring that in. But was it enough? No, not yet. But again, it was still that starting point. We started entering the buoy data and all the different data that we could get our hands on. We were doing 3-day forecasts. And then we were trying to mix the 3-day forecast with the data that was collected from the states on the red tide data. So we were trying to put all of this together, looking at loop currents and everything else that we could do. So we were trying. We were experimenting, really, is what we were doing. And then we would go back to our constituents in the states and say, is this working? Is this helping? Are we getting there? What more do you need? What can we do to help you get it there? And this is at the time we were doing this. I wasn't EPA, by the way. It was NOAA's NCDDC at that time, which has a new name now, but it was NCDDC at the time. Let's see. Sea surface temperature, salinity. These are all the things that we were trying to do. Put all of this in there. We wanted to support that 24-hour advance notice. Could we get there to that point? If we can give the public 24-hour notice, we can protect our beaches and keep the sicknesses down. Tourism never likes it. We know that much. But it's to protect the people. So we started looking at the data that we could gather to put in there. Again, this is just some more data sets that we started putting in. We were able to reach out to NOAA and the NASA data. I mean, this at the time, this was the best of what was out there. And all that's changed. But this was best of the best. So we had the data sets, we could incorporate it, we could look at it, we could zoom in to the coastline, and we could see that and overlap that with the data sets. I'm just going to slip through a few of these because there's a lot. All right, then back in 2007, here comes another meeting. We brought the Mexican delegation up. They were interested in the Brevy busters. They were interested in putting some seaman stations in because they needed some kind of way to look at what was happening in their waters. They needed some kind of detection, prediction. And so they identified 3 different locations that they wanted to put some buoys. NOAA data buoy was tasked with the order of putting 3 seaman stations out in Mexico. The Veracruz Aquarium, and that's because it was just right outside the aquarium where they had the influx of water coming in red tide. Sacrifice Island is where they hold some of their other animals in between, and then La Mancha Beach was just further up the beach. This is what they were going to collect with the seaman station. Now you got to remember, they don't have what we had. They didn't have anything, so this was something to get them started. So we're trying to get them the Brevy busters. At the same time all this was happening, NOS was doing the bulletins. Rick Stump in DC had built a beautiful bulletin that was working for Florida, and it was working well. He started working on Texas, getting that one, getting the process ready for that one. And then by the end, we had the Northern Gulf of Mexico one, which was pretty neat because the dynamics of the Northern Gulf are totally different than Texas and Florida. Y'all would all agree with me on that. So it made it a little more difficult. But Rick was able to pull it off, and we were able to get those bulletins. And I'm not sure because I'm not involved as much on this part, but are the bulletins still available? Angela, do you know, or Jonathan, do y'all know if that's, I don't know. So again, we were looking at that HAB forecast system. We needed those observations. We needed those models so that we could put those conditions out and those bulletins out so that the right folks knew what was going on. Again, some more. We were able to, NOAA was able to help us with Veracruz and get some animation loops to help them with some of their predictions. And it really paid off because they were able to make some positive strides to protect their communities. So we can see these are some of the areas that NRL was successful in putting some of their models together. And then we revamped HABSOS to 2.0. And Jonathan can tell you what version it's on now, maybe when he gets to it. But we just started remapping because we wanted to put it in Spanish. We were trying to help our Mexican counterparts as well at the same time. So we did do a Spanish version. And then we were able to start adding new data sets into it as well. The data entry tool is what came out of that new version. And the data entry tool was because the states didn't want to have to send us their spreadsheet, and then we upload the spreadsheet. Well, why can't we just do it ourselves? And we're like, okay. So we tried to build this data entry tool. Long story short, it wasn't the most successful tool. We tried. What happened is it wanted you to enter the data one by one. We couldn't get a mass load up. We were fighting it, so we were trying to do it on the back end. It just didn't work as well as we wanted it to. But again, it was collecting all the things that we needed. We based this off of what Florida was doing, but we also took it on based upon one of the states that had the least amount of data. What was the least amount of data that I have to make that data entry tool work and get the data that I need? And that's how this was built. Of course, you're seeing all that in Spanish. Then GOMA comes along and GOMA gets involved with the HABs. We had a water quality team, and within that team, they had a HABs work group. And that HABs work group continued to work with not just the United States, with our 5 Gulf states, but they were working with Mexico as well. So again, just more meetings. If you can't tell, there was a huge collaboration, not just with the states, right? Mexico really did care. So there were several meetings down there in Florida. We even had a kiosk that was dedicated to it. This is all meetings about HABs. All these meetings are about HABs. And then some training opportunities, we tried to get that out there to help people make better decisions with the data that was being provided at the time. Starting in about 2008, well, 2006 we did the first one. In 2000, no, I guess it was 8. In 2008, we started working with Veracruz. The whole point of getting to Florida was to teach them how we do what we did in the United States to make it more effective to them, so that they could make the decisions we were making in the States. When something happened, say for instance in Texas, they were better informed and knew who to talk to in Texas, or if the bloom was in Mexico, I'm sorry, then they knew who to contact in Texas. And it's just not, well, we have a bloom. No, we have a bloom that's of this size, and this is the density of the red tide, and then they could start sharing that information in a useful manner to our Texas managers that needed to know that information. So we had to help them a little bit. We got them some microscopes. We got them, and then we sent, let's see, microscopes, laptops, visual cameras. These are things they didn't have, and this is basic. And so we were able to help them. This is actually EPA, where they came in on this part and started working on getting them the money that they needed to put this in place. And then we started doing some binational taxonomy training. So the information that our folks were using, the scientists in the field who were in the labs or in the office that were doing all that microscope work day after day, having to count, do those counts, we were teaching them how to do it, how to identify, how to do those counts. What are the other things that they needed to do? And so we started in Veracruz. And again, we just kind of, and the training, when I tell you the gratitude, they were so grateful to have that. We ended up having to, now GOMA did this one, help them get some boats so that they could get their scientists out into the water. Even that was a stretch for them. It was difficult. And again, they started coming to our meetings, and then they started sharing what the work was able to do for them and the successes that they were having. So going back to those Seaman stations that they needed so bad to know what was going on. We get the money together. We're going to go put these Seaman stations in. And when I say if there wasn't one problem, there were many problems. It was problem from day one. Getting them in was a stretch. I guess I should go back. Getting them in was a stretch because this one was a remote location. And we had hurricanes, we had theft, you name it, it was happening out there. So we go back and we do some more workshops. We went to 5 of the 6 Mexican states. We couldn't hit the 6th one because of security issues that kept us out. But these are all scientists. These are the ones that sit there in the lab counting, or they're the ones out in the boat collecting the data. So we were doing some follow-ups, meeting with the governors. This is where there was an entire kiosk dedicated to red tide in Veracruz. And what they were trying to do was educate their public in the aquarium about what red tide was and what it really meant, and bring more awareness. And then, again, of course, they were coming to our meetings as well. And then comes, let's get those seaman stations installed. You see this buoy where they're putting this one on. This is outside the Veracruz Aquarium, and the issues that they had. And there's some rough water in there. And I hate to tell y'all, but that one's gone. The weather took it out. It's toppled over. And but it was having problems with corrosion even before then. So we've had some issues with that one. The one at La Mancha was destroyed, and the one at Sacrifice Island may still barely be functional. But here they are putting, this is NOAA data buoy folks out there putting these up. I mean, look great, but you know, the folks down there between the hurricanes and the theft. So Hurricane Carl made landfall. Our folks were, I shouldn't say our folks, the NOAA folks were in Mexico when this hurricane made landfall. So they had to shelter in place, and as soon as they were cleared to leave the hotel, they went back to go see the damage that took place. We've had some troubles there. So here's some of the damage that took place out there. So all of this is things that we need to do the data that they needed to help them, and it's kind of a setback for them. And we've not had that relationship with Mexico right now. If I say it has some of it to do with a change in our election years and who's president and who's not, that's about all I'm going to say about that. So right now, our EPA, we're not working with Mexico right now. But here's the one I really wanted to focus on. In 2011, we decided to do a taxonomy training in the United States. We were doing such a great job with our folks in Mexico. We said, hey guys, we need to take this back to the States. This is so successful. Why are we not doing this in the States with our people? We need this. So Karen Steininger and I talked about it. We got Carm, I think Carm was at that one as well. And we brought some of our scientists together from all the states. We were in the Keys. I mean, what better place to go out there and study and do this? And we had some great time microscopic exercises. They did some Play-Doh, developing some of their own, shaping up some of their own little harmful algal blooms or harmful algal. So we were having a lot of fun, but it was about getting them trained up. That was the most important thing, is getting them trained with the things that we learned while we were in Mexico. While we were in Mexico, something else happened. And this is going to be the best part of the news that I'm going to tell you about in just a moment, of what came out of that that's going to benefit you. Okay. So again, we were finishing out our 5 states. 5 states are done. Of Mexico, we've had our training in the U.S., and we're feeling pretty good about everything that's happening. This is the most important tool for you guys. Karen Steininger, her goal, her wish was to get this book out in English and in Spanish. And it is a guide to all things HABs. That book is about this thick. It's in color, and it's wonderful. But I'm going to tell you the bad news. To get that book, you have to order 25 to get the book. Now, if y'all can find a way to collaborate and get that book, order the books and get them spread to everybody, go for it. But you don't have to spend any money because it's a free download. They made it available free to everybody. It has pictures. It has graphics. It has everything you could think of. If you're that scientist in that lab looking under that microscope, this is what you want. And that just recently came to play about 2 months ago. We finally got that poor little HAB book finished. It has been probably 10 years in the making of trying to get that done, but it is all inclusive. Karen Steininger worked really hard. Maria Miyavi is the co-author from Mexico that she worked with. So we made sure when it was converted into Spanish that it was all things good. So while I gave you a big overview of HABs, not necessarily in the Northern Gulf, but why that collaboration was so important and how it drove HABs and the HABSOS tool where it did over those years up until about 2011, okay? So I'm about 8 years behind because I've stepped away and doing some other things, coming back into the program now. But this is the one thing I wanted to leave everybody with, was that handbook. And if you have any questions about that, I can give you some contact information if you need that as well. But again, it is a free download. Please take advantage. You would make Karen Steininger extremely happy to know that it's being used. We want any feedback we can get from anybody on that as well. So if y'all have any questions, but that's all I have. So thank y'all very much.
And because she was so wonderful and on time, we actually do have time for a couple of questions if anybody has any for Jeanne.
Is that a website listed on this paper?
I don't believe that's listed on there. I'll get it from Jeanne and I'll make sure it gets put up on the screen so you guys can get that written out. I'll email it to my phone. Yeah, okay, good. Any other questions for Jeanne?
You know, my only point that I saw, and it's great, but I still don't hear predictive tool. I hear a lot of effort being put into one, going all the way back to 2000. We're no better off than we were in 2000.
Jonathan may can follow up on that some more since he's been working on that more than I have. But back up until I was there, I mean, it was a struggle. It was that struggle to get that predictive tool. And that's why we kept going back and saying, what do we need? And we were working with all the right people to get it there. And I think we know the data's out there. We know the things are out there that we need the tools, but how do we get it there? And I'm just going to tell you, that has been the struggle. And here we are, 2019, and technology's changing. And, you know, those changes, we've got enough folks that can do it. We just got to figure out how that does get put together. I agree. And it's still, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to get that predictive piece in there.